This is Kathy Quinn with Floriani, and I want to welcome you to the construction portion of our POM, our Project of the Month, number 27. This is Needle Turn and Raw Edge Applique Pillowcase. Now the first thing we're going to do is we are going to hoop Floriani Wet and Gone Fusible side to the right side of the fabric. We are going to hoop it with the wrong side of the fabric looking at us. Stitch out your leaves. You will also stitch out your centers in the same manner using your center fabric. Now once we've stitched out these leaves, we're going to remove it from the hoop, and we have left enough space when we digitize these leaves so we can trim, leaving an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance around our leaves. We're going to do the same with the flower centers. When you do, we're going to keep the currency. We are going to trim around that. We are also going to make sure that we clip our curves, not clipping through the seam line, but up to the seam line. And we're going to make sure we blunt off the points on our leaves so that we'll have a nice, pretty turn when we do turn our leaves. Now, you are going to slit the Wet and Gone Fusible on the back, being careful, of course, not to cut through your leaf fabric. Now, with that slit, you are going to turn the leaf through it, and that is going to turn the edge of your applique piece under. So it will now have that needle turn look. Once you have turned the edges under, using a nice point turner to make sure you get nice crisp turn on this, and I do not want you to poke through with your point turner, so be very careful not to. Now after we've stitched out our leaves and our centers, we've turned them, we are going to press them. Now we're going to use a Teflon pressing cloth so that you don't, number one, fuse the pieces to your ironing board. Now the next reason is we want to still have glue left on our Wet and Gone Fusible. And we're going to press these so we have a nice, crisp, clean edge. Now the next step we're going to do, we're going to get all of our pieces ready prior to stitching. We're going to now print out our template on our 8.5 by 11 sheets of Applique Wonder. Now remember, we made placement lines when we digitized the flower itself. So we made one design that we could just print out a template from, and like I said, we're going to print it out on this slick side of the Applique Wonder 8.5 by 11 sheets. Once we've done that, cut around them and iron them onto the wrong side of your applique fabric. You will cut them out, and I want you to make sure as you cut them out just on the outside edge of that printed line, so that when we place these over the placement line on our fabric, we'll make sure to just cover those edges. Now the next step, we will print out our design templates. Now remember, we created 3 designs here that we're going to stitch templates from, and it's our center flower, our right flower, and our left flower. We are going to print these out on template tearaway. And remember, we looked at our print options, and we want to make sure that all we print out in this, we want to make sure we print out the stitches, we want it actual size, and we want to make sure that we have also selected our placement lines. Once we've printed those out, we are going to now mark our pillowcase body fabric. Now on my pillowcase, the body is orange and the cuff is pink. So I'm going to take my orange fabric that is 3/4 of a yard and by the width of the fabric. We are going to fold our fabric in half the 44-inch way, and we're going to fold it down so that we have a 22-inch piece looking at us, because our pillowcase will be 21.5 inches wide by the length of your 3/4 inches of fabric, which is 24 inches, plus we're going to put a 5-inch cuff on it. So we are going to fold our fabric in half, and we are going to mark from the folded edge. We're going to come over 10.5 inches, and that is going to mark our center vertical line on our pillowcase. Because remember, we'll have a 1/2 inch seam allowance on both pieces, so we end up with a 21-inch piece. So I want you to mark your vertical line. Now your horizontal line will be marked according to the height that you made your flowers. Now we are going to iron our Wet and Gone Fusible to the back of our pillowcase fabric. I've used Wet and Gone Fusible because we are basically just doing a lot of single stitching here. So we don't need a heavy tearaway on it, or even any kind of tearaway. What we're going to use is the Wet and Gone Fusible, so that when we are finished, we can trim away what we possibly can, and the rest will wash out when we wash our applique fabric. Because we want that little, on our needle turn, leaves and centers, we're going to put that little zigzag, and what we want is for that to kind of pull in and kind of disappear, so it will look like needle turn applique. So now we are going to hoop our fabric, placing our template tearaway on, lining up our vertical center and our horizontal center, centering your needle, remove your template tearaway, put it back on its backing paper, especially if you're going to make a couple of pillowcases to match for the bed. We can reuse this template. Now we are going to stitch out our placement lines. Now I apologize because when I took this picture, it's a little bit difficult to see the placement lines on my picture. You won't have any problems on your fabric, but it does make it a little bit different. I have put a large arrow pointing at the flower, and then I've put smaller arrow pointing at one of the leaves, and you can see the center placement line for your Rickrack. Now we are going to prepare our Rickrack. We're going to take a yard. Now you're not going to need a yard for your stems, but I always like to have a little extra to be safe. So I'm going to take my 1/2 inch Applique Wonder tape. Now I have used medium Rickrack, so the tape is wider than our Rickrack. What I'm going to do is take out a yard of my tape, and I am going to lay it on my cutting mat. Using my ruler and a rotary cutter, I'm going to measure over 1/4 inch and cut the tape in half. Then I'm going to iron the Applique Wonder to the back of my Rickrack. I'm going to fuse it on. Now that it's fused on, I'm going to go ahead and place my leaves, and I've used the Wet and Gone Fusible. Now when we turn these leaves, the fusible is now facing out. We've pressed them nice and crisp, and now we are going to place those leaves down using our placement lines on our fabric. Now I'm going to take one of those little applique irons, the little triangle looking iron, and I am going to press this down so it sticks to our background fabric. It's going to fuse down so we can make sure it does not move as we stitch it down. Now you can do this in the hoop. If you do not have a good table underneath your hoop, take your hoop off the machine, being very careful not to pop the hoop. Sit it down on a nice flat surface and go ahead and press these leaves down. Fuse them down inside the placement line. Put your hoop back on your machine and stitch them down. Now we're going to pull the protective paper off of our Rickrack. We are going to now stick it down on that center placement line, making sure the top of the tape is a little bit above the flower head placement, and the bottom of the Rickrack, I am going to have a line. I'm going to measure up 1/2 inch from the bottom of our pillowcase, and we are going to stick that Rickrack down below that 1/2 inch because that's going to be our seam line, and I want to make sure that this Rickrack is caught within the seam line. Now we will go ahead and stick it down, and then we will push our button and it will stitch that center placement line, stitching down our Rickrack. Now the next step is we're going to take one of our flowers that has already been cut out, and we're going to peel the protective paper off the back of the applique wonder that has been ironed onto the wrong side of our applique fabric. Now you can see in my picture how I put the Rickrack up underneath the flower head, because when I put this down I want to make sure it catches the raw edge of my Rickrack. Now I'm going to go ahead and stitch the flower head down, and the next thing that we're going to stitch out is our placement line for our flower center. So it's going to stitch out our circle. We are going to again iron our circle down within that placement line and go ahead and push the button and stitch that down. So we will have completed our center flower. Now we're going to re-hoop our pillowcase fabric, and we are going to use our template to set our left-hand flower down, making sure we like the placement next to the center flower. So you can manipulate that till you like how it's placed, because you can see where it's going to stitch out. Once you have that, go ahead and center your needle, remove your template tearaway, put it back on your backing paper, and repeat this process for the left-hand flower. Then you're going to come back and repeat the process for the right-hand flower, and you will be finished with all of your embroidery. Once we've finished our embroidery, we are going to take our Rickrack that we have purchased for the trim. This is going to be caught in between the cuff and the body of our pillowcase when we construct it. So you are going to mark a 1/2 inch line up from the raw edge of your pillowcase body, making sure you catch the bottoms of your stems for your flowers, because we've made sure when we stuck that Rickrack down that it came within that bottom 1/2 inch so it would be caught in the seam line. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to run it right along that 1/2 inch line. Now I'm going to make sure the scallops are just inside the line, because I want those caught in my seam line. When I attach the cuff, it's going to catch the edge of that Rickrack, so it will be nice for trim. Once I stick it down, I'm then going to press it. I want this fused to the pillowcase so it does not move and slip when I am sewing it together. Now once I have ironed this down, I am going to cut. I bought out of my cuff fabric, I want a 10-inch wide piece by the width of the fabric, so it's going to be 10 by 44 inches long, and I am going to place raw edges together, right sides down, and we're going to match up these raw edges. I'm going to go to my serger and I'm going to serge using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and it's going to catch this Rickrack in that seam allowance. Once I have finished that, I'm going to fold it out. I'm going to go ahead and press along that line, and now I'm going to roll up the orange, the body of my pillowcase. I'm going to start rolling that in a tight little roll towards the band, towards my cuff of my pillowcase. Now I'm going to roll it all the way up, and then I'm going to match the raw edge of my pillowcase cuff to the serged edge where I've serged the body and the cuff together. And those are going to go right sides together, catching the body of the pillowcase inside, kind of like a burrito. The body of my pillowcase is the meat, and the pink is my flour tortilla. So I'm going to catch it up, and then once I have matched those raw edges nice and together, I'm going to go and I'm going to serge right on top of the line I've already serged. I'm going to serge right on that same seam the length of that 44 inches. Once I've done that, you're going to see, you can see my pillowcase, the body rolled up inside like a tube. Now I'm going to reach in, grab the body of my pillowcase, in my case the orange fabric, and I'm going to pull it out. What that's going to do is flip it, and you're going to have the body fabric attached to the cuff fabric. You're going to have that Rickrack along for a nice little decorative effect, and you are going to not be able to see the seam where you have attached the cuff to the body of the pillowcase. And this is a very nice look. It's flat garment construction. You can do waistbands that way, and you can do collar stands that way. Now, once I have done that, I'm going to fold my pillowcase right sides together, matching up the raw edges, and make sure you match up the edges where your cuff, where that seam comes in, that you match them exactly. And then I'm going to go to my serger and stitch across the bottom and all the way down the side to complete the construction of my pillowcase. Then I am going to turn the pillowcase out, press it very nicely, and we now have a finished pillowcase. I am going to go back a step because I realize when you turn this out, when you pull it out and turn it, go ahead and press your cuff really good before constructing it, because we want to press that cuff so we have a nice crisp crease in it before we go ahead and match raw edges together, so we can make sure we get a nice seam along this edge matching up that seam line. Now we are finished. Turn it out, press it nicely, and you are finished with your pillowcase, and you have done raw edge applique in the hoop. You've done needle turn applique in the hoop, and this needle turn is great because maybe you like to stitch your applique down by hand. Maybe you like to do some hem work. Well, the nice thing is you can make all your pieces in the hoop this way, turn them, press them nicely, then you can hand stitch them down if you wish. I'm all for doing everything possible in the hoop. I want to thank you for coming to this month's Project of the Month, and I look forward to seeing you again when we have our Project of the Month number 28. Thank you.